economic growth thrives best where there is good governance. So I said we have to invest in the nationwide optic fiber network.
Among the Hall of Fame of African lions and lionesses, I always reserve a special place on this channel of those lions or lionesses who have actually managed to do something that most leaders in Africa seem to fail to do, which is to step down after they are done with their term in office. This president we are going to cover today, President Jakaya Kikwete of Tanzania, is one of the most inspiring leaders that I've had an opportunity to read about and learn from, and also even meet in person. He's a great guy, he's an amazing guy who is really rooting for the development of Africa and really rooting for the technological advancement and the economic breakthrough of the continent. Today we're going to look at his top 10 rules for success, and we're going to figure out what is it that he has said in the past that makes him tick, and what is it that he has said in the past which he thinks will help Africa as a whole, including us, the young lions and the young lionesses of Africa who are trying to make it through in this world and figure out what it is that we can do for the African continent. We're going to start with his rule number 1. Africa must invest in education.
We have to ensure that expand primary education. There is this MDG target of universal primary education by 2015. We have to invest more in building schools, train more teachers, get the textbooks, get the teaching materials, something that we need to do. We need to expand on secondary education. We need to invest more. Of course, our case, what we did with secondary school education is involve the communities. Because when we came in, we were taking 350,000 students in secondary school. We worked with communities. We were able to build 3,000 secondary schools, and now we have a population of 1.7 million students. The challenge has been manufacturing teachers. We expanded in university training of teachers. We are now almost getting there. We are now remaining with a shortage of 50,000 teachers, which I think in the next 2 or 3 years we'll overcome that. We have to expand on higher education. We have to build more universities, which we should. So at times it is the government, but in our case we found with working with the communities has worked incredibly well. We have been able to expand.
Education, of course, does not just mean the old textbooks and teachers writing on chalkboards that we're used to as we were growing up. President Kikwete says on top of this overall and older form of education, we need to make sure that we have technological advancements that we bring in that will help our people and our continent to develop.
Tanzania, in fact, the whole of the east coast of the African continent was not connected to the submarine optic fiber network. It was non-existent. It was only on the west coast, up to Cape Town, up to South Africa. It was on the Red Sea, the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. But on the east coast, it was not there. So there was a time I went to US. I met a US company called Scythe Global. We were talking about investing in Stigler's Gorge. But in the discussion, they also told me the idea of this terrestrial, the submarine terrestrial cable. And they told me that, you are not connected. You are not connected to the global information superhighway. We are using satellites, that's all, for communication. So, okay, we agreed that let them start that. That is how we came with CCOM. But I said, okay, fine. If Seacom lands fall in Dar es Salaam, if you don't have a nationwide optic fiber network, how are you going to make use of that? So I said we have to invest. In the nationwide optic fiber network. So that's why we talked to the Chinese. We got a loan from the Chinese with Huawei. We started building the optic fiber network, connecting all the districts, connecting all the regions, all the districts in the country. Of course, we are left with the last mile. The last mile was connecting all schools, connecting all hospitals, all schools for e-education, connecting all hospitals for e-health, and connecting all government institutions so that we can have e-government. Well, by the time I left, it was almost done.
Rule number 3, on which economic system works best? Former President Kikwete says you should always remember that free markets work better than state control of the economy.
Africa should continue to open up, because I'm talking about our experience when the economy was state controlled. We had a lot of inefficiencies. The benefits that we expected to get out of that were not realized. So I think the free market enterprise, the free market dictum is the way to go, definitely.
Of course, there are some industries where the private sector might not be willing to get in itself, given the risks that are involved, and also given that it might take long for their investment to come back. Those who do investment will know something like internal rate of return and payback period might be too long for private enterprises to try to be involved in such activities. Such activities will usually involve government investing, knowing that the returns will come in 10, 20, or even 30 years. For these types of projects, President Kikwete still emphasizes that the government must make sure at least that it knows where the source of the raw materials is going to be before they can make major investments.
With commercialization of agriculture, you will have enough production that would ensure enough feed of raw materials to the factories. We have had that experience with the cashew nut industry in the past. But these are factories that were built with the advice of the World Bank. We took a loan. We built 12 factories to end up with not enough raw material. There was the time I was Minister of Finance and we had to pay the loan to the World Bank. And we were saying, but you know what happened? Then we were told, but why did you accept it? We said, fine. So that's why we're investing a lot on the production side, on the agricultural sector. But we still have a lot of raw materials, for example, for the textile industry, for the leather industry. We have over 20 million heads of cattle, the leather industry. So there are a number of agricultural manufacturing processes that have enough raw material already, and we are cognizant of that fact, Madam, and we are modernizing our agricultural sector in order to produce enough. But we think we already have a critical mass to be able to establish a number of the agro-processing industries.
Rule number 5, good governance is the key for economic growth.
But the country has to be governed well. You know, in Africa, in the past, of course, I'm not sure now, some leaders used to complain, to think that, to be reminded of, please ensure that there's good governance. And it is good. But how do you govern a country badly? And when somebody says, please, govern well, and you think this person who is telling you to govern well is the bad man. And so I said, pursuit of good governance is a fundamental matter for me and for our administration. One, we have to ensure that we continue to entrench democracy. Economic growth thrives best where there is good governance. If there is democracy, if there is rule of law, there is respect for human rights, respect for basic freedoms, freedoms of expression, freedom of association, freedom of religion, and all, where these basic freedoms are observed, things will always be good.
Rule number 6, and in explaining what good governance is, the governments across the African continent and definitely all over the world must aim to build inclusive political and economic institutions.
I think it's the pursuit of sound political and economic policies, in the sense that politics and economic policies that have been inclusive, inclusive. That nobody is being discriminated against or being denied the right to have access or the political or economic because of his ethnicity, because of his tribe, because of his religion, or the part of the country that he comes from, or because of his gender. I think, and our first leader really created the foundations for this. That he made it clear that if we discriminate each other on the basis of ethnicity, religion, color of the skin, or tribe, or the area we come from, we are going to tear apart the country. So he laid these foundations, and fortunately the successive leaders have maintained this policy, have advanced this policy, and it is actually, in my view, it is what has really delivered.
Rule number 7, governments must consult with their citizens in determining which priorities they are going to have, especially when it comes to spending and figuring out which investments need to be done in the country.
And then we've been starting to develop this system. But the good thing of it is we started first we chose 6 sectors to begin with. And then in each of these sectors, the first thing we did was do an in-depth analysis of the situation in those 3 sectors, in those 6 sectors. What are the challenges? And in this, we
when you say sectors, you're talking about things like agriculture, education.
We had agriculture, we had energy, we had health, we had education, we had infrastructure, and we had government revenue.
Right.
Yes. But what we did, really, we had an in-depth discussion. First, an evaluation of the challenges in these sectors. What are the issues? And in this evaluation, it was not confined to government bureaucrats. It involved the civil society. He was very active in the education sector. He has always been. It involved the common people. It involved major players, private sector players. It involved government officials. So they had an in-depth analysis of the challenges in each sector. They came up with the concrete proposals on what needs to be done in each of those sectors, and then we factored that in our budget. In fact, last year we tried, but because the process went concurrently when we were doing the budget processes. But in this year's budget, then we were able to factor what was proposed. So you can see my concern has been the government has to deliver. What are the issues and how do we deliver? So
and it's easier to work with people. And
it is always easier because when you work with these the common people and the players in the actor, you know exactly what are the issues, what they need to be done. Then we came up with a set of issues. For example, in education, they came up with 9 proposals.
Okay.
While most governments have been investing in a lot of things, it is essential to go back to the basics, and President Kikwete says the lack of water infrastructure and water development has actually been impeding development on the African continent.
Many people don't have access to sanitation facilities, sanitation services. It is estimated in the African continent about 700 million people don't have access to proper sanitation facilities. The latrines, the toilets, in urban areas, the sewerage and drainage, and when in urban areas where there are slums, the situation is even worse. Is even worse. So that's one aspect why we have to invest in water and sanitation on the African continent. But the third factor is that economic activities and services demand water, need water, and we don't have enough water for industries, for agriculture, for healthcare, for services like hotels, for office buildings, and so on, for businesses. So in a way, lack of water itself is an impediment to growth and development on the African continent. This is what brings the case for investing in water. It is so urgent. It's so urgent that we cannot continue this way. Of course, there is an acknowledgement that governments are doing a lot, have been doing a lot, but there are still huge gaps that have got to be met, and it is so urgent.
Rule number 9, outside support is essential for Africa to grow.
So I'm saying infrastructure, education, health are critical for accelerating growth in Africa, promoting and accelerating growth in Africa. But all these require huge sums of money, which African governments cannot meet all that is required. I'm not saying that African governments are doing nothing and therefore they are simply waiting for philanthropy or for benevolence. No, we're trying our best. Take for our case, for example, 17% of our budget is allocated for education, 13% for infrastructure, 11% for health. We are doing so much, but it is so big in terms of a small budget. The budget of Tanzania is $7 billion. The other time, in 2006, I was invited for a business lunch at NASDAQ. And the CEO there was saying, well, we are the technology market. Our business is 7 trillion. We are grappling with a $7 billion budget to meet our demands, our huge challenges. At the same time, in the evening, I had lunch, which my brother Andy Young organized with a few brothers and sisters. One sister we were engaged in a conversation, and she was complaining that she just have a small business with a turnover of $3 billion. So you can imagine, this one is complaining, the business is small, with a turnover of $3 billion. I'm in charge of a nation of 40 million people. Our budget is only $7 billion. So we're trying our best, but there is limited resources. There is limit to what we can do on our own. That's why we are saying Africa needs to be assisted.
Rule number 10, planned parenting empowers women and girls.
Secondly, we have been promoting family planning as part of the National Reproductive Health Strategy. Among the important benefits of family planning is the fact that 20 to 35% of maternal death could be avoided through prevention of unplanned and unwanted pregnancies. Also, mothers and children can become healthier, and families can better provide for the care and upbringing of their children. Girls will not be forced to drop out of school because of unexpected pregnancies. It is good for the overall growth and development of the country.
Well guys, I'm sure you have seen why I am very interested and why I have followed this African lion and even gotten to the point of making a series on him. He's an interesting guy, but rest assured he is not someone who has actually retired, for he is continuing on with efforts to help the African continent even after he has stepped down from his political position as the President of the Republic of Tanzania. You will see that he has a foundation that is helping so many things that are happening on the African continent and working with the UN to mobilize funds. Of course, he's an amazing guy, and if you have any other African lion or lioness who you want me to profile next, be sure to leave it in the comments below. Until next time, my name is Maro.